Mr. President, I rise today as we're talking about the budget, and I want to talk a little about that, being a member of the Budget Committee and someone very concerned about the fiscal direction of our country. I'd also like to talk a little about a trip I just took to Israel. Over the last weekend, I was in Israel having meetings with Prime Minister Netanyahu, members of the Knesset, Minister of Intelligence, the Deputy Foreign Minister, and others. And part of what I want to talk about in the budget relates to that. This budget, by the way, is the first time in 6 years that we've had the ability for the House and Senate to come together and to have a congressional budget. 6 years. During that 6 years, by the way, I think there's been $8 trillion added to the national debt. During that 6 years, there has not been adequate oversight of the departments and agencies of government, in part because there hasn't been a budget. And without a budget, it's very difficult to go through the appropriations process, which means that not only has spending been high, more money being spent than coming in terms of revenues year after year to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars, but also we haven't had the ability to have the appropriate checks and balances, oversight of the departments and agencies that you get through the appropriations process. So after 6 years, it's about time, to my constituents, when I go home and say, we're going to do a budget this year for the first time in 6 years, they say, well, what took you so long? Why is it that I've got to have a budget in my family and have to have a budget in my business and in our community and in the county and the state, and Congress can't get its act together? So we are, this afternoon, I believe, going to pass this budget, and it does provide this framework for going forward. Now, what is that framework? Well, it's a balanced budget over 10 years. So although it's the first time that Congress has come together in 6 years to have a budget, it's actually the first time since 2001 that there has been a budget that gets to balance, that's presented and passed by this Congress. So that's important. Earlier, one of my colleagues was talking about everything that's cut in this budget. Actually, those decisions are going to be made by the appropriations committees. And that's appropriate. They're the committees that are responsible for spending every dime. Congress has that responsibility. They're the ones who should look at the priorities. They're the ones who should decide which program's working, which one's not working, which one should get less money, which one should get more money, which ones maybe should be reformed and changed. So that's the process here we're now beginning to undertake, and it's exactly what we're hired to do. Is it an easy vote? No. And yet I think you'll see this afternoon that we will get the necessary 51 votes to pass this budget and begin to move the country forward. It not only balances the budget within 10 years, it does it without raising taxes. It does it in a way that actually strengthens Medicare, protects Social Security, supports this healthier and stronger economy we need in this country. We just had the economic growth numbers come out for the first quarter, and boy, they're disappointing, 0.2%. We just had some weak numbers in terms of the jobs numbers last month. We've got to do better, and we can and should do better, and part of it comes from better policies here in Washington, D.C. Policies that encourage people to get out there, work hard, take a risk, let people know that if they do play by the rules and work hard, they can get ahead. And there's so much more that we can do with tax reform and regulatory relief and coming up with smart ways to deal with health care, and that's what this budget does, by the way. It also improves the efficiency, effectiveness, accountability of government. This is very important. It has in a particular provision that I feel strongly about, as the presiding officer knows, who's done a great job of shepherding this through the process as chairman of the Budget Committee, and that's to ensure that we can have the information here on the floor of the Senate to decide what's the best tax reform to pursue, because we'll now have not just what's called the static analysis, but also an analysis that takes into account the fact that tax policy actually does change people's behavior. We all know that. Everybody knows that. But we haven't had that information until now. This macroeconomic scoring of a tax provision is going to make it much more likely to come up with good tax reform that will help give this economy the shot in the arm that it needs to get moving. So I'm pleased the fact that we're finally going to move forward on a budget. It is discouraging that it took this long, 6 years, but with the new Republican majority, we've committed to do this, and I'm very pleased that this afternoon we're going to finally see, for the hardworking taxpayers that I represent, the opportunity to actually have a budget around here and to get individual appropriations bills done. One other part of the budget that relates to the trip that I just took is our defense spending. The budget helps to provide more avenues for increasing defense where needed. And in this dangerous world in which we live, we do have to ensure that we have a strong defense that's up to the challenges that we face.